We are recording. That is a reminder for us to record this meeting. And also closed captions is available to you at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So if you need that function, please use it. All right. So we would like to first start off by introducing your CTPD consultants who have worked very hard along with our partners at the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce to put today's presentation together. So I would like to introduce from Regions 1 through 4, Lisa Height in Region 1, Matt Marino, Region 2, yours truly for 3, Dr. Crystal Brisky from Region 4, Jody Glazer from Region 5, who's hosting the watch party over there at CTCC. Dr. Ray Blevin from Region 6, Julie Frankel, Region 7, Dr. Stacia Kashak from Region 8, Terrell Swick from Region 9, Carrie Hunter, Region 10, Radisha Young-Willingham from Region 11, Cindy Miller from Region 12, Melissa Salazzo from Region 13, Beth Duffy from Region 16, and Forrest Kuhn, Region 14 and 15. And just a quick note and a thank you that Forrest will be retiring as of March 1st. So Forrest, I'm not sure if you're here, but if you are, thank you for all of the hard work that you've done. You'll be missed. From the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, we are happy to have with us Amy Zamansky from the Secondary Transition and Workforce Development, Office of Exceptional Children, Chelsea Canterbury, who works as an education program specialist overseeing job training coordinator, CBI, career-based intervention, middle school programs, and Chelsea is from the Office of Career Tech Education. Also, Carrie Calzo from the Ohio Transition Support Partnership Project, and Brenna Bartlett, who is the Assistant Director of the Office of Career and Technical Education. So without further ado, we are going to get started here by beginning with some timely announcements from Amy Zamansky and Chelsea Canterbury. So take it away, guys.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you to my fabulous Career Technical Planning District consultant friends at the state support teams for hosting this meeting today. Bob, if you could go to the next slide for me, please. What we are most excited to share with you today is that the Career Tech marketing campaign has officially launched. Hopefully, a lot of you on this call have seen a commercial on TV or heard something on the radio. We are actually also live on Snapchat, soon to be coming to YouTube, soon to be coming to a whole bunch of other social media platforms. So if you haven't seen it yet, it will be coming. For tangible resources, we're actually able to offer a new CTE brochure, which sort of lays out all of the career fields that we offer in Ohio, as well as each of the pathways that are available within those career fields, with information about what careers those pathways might lead to. We're super excited also to be able to highlight in that brochure supports for students with disabilities and all of the ways that career tech is great for all students, regardless of your post-secondary pathway. So I encourage you to check out the new link to the marketing materials. If you go to our homepage, the CTE homepage at the Department of Education and Workforce website, you cannot miss those two adorable little gentlemen up in the top, right at the top on that banner where it says your future, your way. And that will take you to all of the marketing materials, and it will be updated as we are able to release more resources for everybody in CTE world. So that's our biggest announcement as far as updates are concerned, and we appreciate all that you guys do.
Okay. And Chelsea, I agree. I think they are adorable as well. And I envy their hair also. I'm just going to say it. So, Okay, so next up we have Amy Zemansky and Ray Blevin, who are going to talk about IDEA Part B, the State Performance Plan, or more affectionately known as SPP, specifically talking about indicators 1, which is the graduation indicator, and 2, which is the dropout. So Amy and Ray, take it away.
Thanks so much, Bob, and good morning, everyone. Bobby pretty much just summarized our entire presentation, so we should probably just hand it back over to you. No, I'm kidding. So if you want to go on to the next slide, Bob, we have added this slide. It is pretty busy, so we do apologize for the number of words on this slide. However, we think that it's important for you all to see exactly where the indicators sit within a much bigger picture of the manner in which we look at how districts are meeting the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act rules. So there are 20 indicators that are reviewed on an annual basis at each school district, as well as then the state compiles the information that we gather from the schools and then send it on to the U.S. Department of Education. The data is compiled for school districts in their special education profiles. You may be familiar with those. And then we, as a state, compile this information into our annual performance report. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat just so that you can, at your leisure, if you're really interested in learning more about the indicators, you can see everything there on this link here. But indicators 1 and 2 sit within the post-secondary world. So if you look at the 4th box down, we've categorized these indicators by kind of context or outcome. And a question that we would be considering when we think about what that outcome would be. So are youth with disabilities prepared for life, work, and post-secondary education? And we measure that by indicator 1, which Bob said is graduation with a regular diploma, indicator 2, which is dropout, indicator 13, which is secondary transition. And that's measured through Part 5 of the IEP, ensuring that there is a compliant transition plan within the IEP once students are 14. And then we also look at indicator 14, which is the percentage of students who have exited school who are engaged in education and employment, or education or employment 1 year after they exit. We used to collect those data through the Ohio Longitudinal Transition Study. You may be familiar with that term. Now, however, we are using the bigger, broader exiting data collection system that is now required as part of our state reporting for the entire department. And this is done through EMIS. Last year was our first year for that. So it is really important that we do obtain the most accurate information so that we can report appropriately to the federal government, and most importantly, learn about where we have gaps and how we can better perform as a state, region, and then at the local level for our students. I'm going to let you go ahead and move on to the next slide, because this is really where we want to jump in. Ray, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Amy. As we've been talking about, we're going to be focusing on indicator 1 and indicator 2. Now, indicator 1 is primarily dealing with graduation. And indicator 1 is the percentage of students with disabilities graduating with a regular diploma during a particular school year. Additionally, indicator 2, dealing primarily with dropout, is the percentage of students with disabilities dropping out of school during a specific school year. Now, the state performance profile is calculated differently, and it's a different set of students when compared to the regular local education agencies report card or the Career Tech Planning District report card. Namely, if we're thinking about our regular report cards, we're using our ESSA definitions and our ESSA calculations around a 4-year and 5-year cohort. We do not focus on the 4-year or 5-year cohort when we're looking at indicator 1 for graduation or indicator 2 for dropout. Rather, we focus on the age group 14 through age 22 of students with disabilities who are exiting school. So if a student is participating in a career technical education program at their local high school or at a local JVSD, and they postpone graduation to continue to receive services to meet their goals around secondary transition, they will not count against the indicator 1 or indicator 2 calculations until the year they actually exit special education. So when we're thinking about the indicator 1 percentage, that is the percentage of students with disabilities who have exited special education services that year and received a regular high school diploma. So if a student graduates and they took the alternate assessment and they use that as the method for determining competency, for example, they would not count as graduating with a regular diploma because of the federal definitions. They're considered as receiving a certificate. Additionally, if we had a child, let's say that is 15 years of age, who is in 8th grade, who no longer is attending school, they've moved. The school district has no idea where they have relocated, and they have been withdrawn from school with a EMIS code indicating that we no longer know if they're continuing education. Though that student was never in high school, they will count as a dropout that year because they fall within that age group of 14 through 22, and they exited special education. Though a career technical planning district, if you are a JVSD or a compact, you are not receiving a state performance profile report on an annual basis. Your associate schools rely on you heavily. And this is one of the reasons it's important to have solid communications when a child may be off track for things like attendance, behavior, or course performance. Because if they drop out of school or they're unable to graduate with a regular diploma at the time of them exiting special education services, that fact will count back on the local education agency. And for some of our smaller associate districts, one student may be enough to actually move them into a non-compliance setting. Now, in the chat box, I'm going to place a link to the state's target setting page for the state performance profile. There is a video that goes over indicator 1 and 2 about how the targets were set on an annual basis and goes into a much more detail specifically on the calculations. Additionally, there are resources there that will go into and provide technical assistance to explain exactly what EMIS codes are counting in what calculations. Provide that to you in case you have any further questions or would like to go into greater detail in those calculations. Bob, if we could go on to the next slide.
Great. Ray, thank you so much for that overview. I think it's really important for us to consider, the implications of the indicators as we work with our schools, with our students, and with our families. I did want to add just one little piece. I know you had given an example, Ray, as far as if a student was graduating or met competency requirements by the alternate assessment for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, that would impact the regular diploma. There are 2 other ways that students may graduate, which would not count towards a regular diploma. And I'm just going to say those really quickly. One would be if the students met the course requirements by using their IEP goals. And the other would be if a student was excused from earning the required scores for competency on either the end of course exam in Algebra 1 and English Language Arts 2, or the alternate assessment for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, reading and math. Those students would still have to take the test. If they didn't earn the scores, remediate, and then retake. And then if they still did not pass, I should say, or earn those scores, the IEP team could determine that excusal. So just a little extra for us to be thinking about as well. So as you are looking at the indicator 1 and 2 target setting materials and the school profiles, we'd like you to think about what the indicator 1 and 2 scores are for your individual school. If you are a traditional school who does in fact report on indicator 1 and 2, and if not, what is the indicator 1 and 2 score for your partner schools? And from there, thinking much more about what are the strategies then that you can be implementing to help address these scores to help increase the graduation with a regular diploma and, of course, decrease dropout. Ray, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add there.
No, I think you've covered the main points. Thank you.
If you do have any questions, I know that Melissa had posted the idea board link. Please let us know. I know this can be sometimes confusing set of indicators. And now that we are working to address those in a much bigger way as a state, those questions continue to come in. So please don't hesitate to ask if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Amy and Ray.
Amy and Ray, it's Melissa. Just a quick question. Is there an easy way to find the indicator scores for partner districts? Did I miss that? I just want to make sure.
Oh, that's a good, right. So you can, and I'll put the link in the chat, you can go to the special education profiles page. If you even just search special education profiles, there is a list of all of the schools. You can get it, you can click on the tab and then just add the district's name right into the search engine, and it'll pick up the profile for that particular school district. I would also recommend that you touch base with your partner school because we do have, I don't know that they've all been posted yet, and there are two distributions of scores. Some come out in the fall, and then others come out in spring. So you may want to make sure that you're touching base with them and getting the most recent scores. And of course, it's also good for communication to be talking about those directly. But I'll put the link in the chat for the profile. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks.
Okay. So next up, we have the Students with IEPs graduation decision-making tool activity with Jody Glazer, who again out of Region 5. Jody?
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So what we're going to talk about, kind of a continuation of that discussion, is students with IEPs, you know, a graduation decision. Like, how do we determine when a student's ready to graduate? When do they exiting programming? And you know, honestly, this should be a discussion that starts very early, as early as 14, you know, possibly even when I'm in elementary school, I may start to have some conversations about when am I going to graduate and things like that. Thank you, Amy, for putting that in the chat for me. You know, we're doing a remote, like I got coffee and muffins, so not to make everyone out there jealous, but you know, this is a great setup we've got going on. So the graduation tool is on the next slide. And at the last session in, I think, January, December, Amy Szymanski kind of gave a quick overview of this. And there's a link to the entire tool, all 4 pages. I think sometimes it's almost easier to go old school when you're looking at this and take those 3 big, long decision trees and put them together and go through the entire flow of that. So, you know, those are linked in there, but it really does start to talk about should a student graduate, when have they met requirements. So we're not going to belabor so much of the tool, but what we're going to do is we're going to start referencing, like, what does it mean and what might some of these conversations mean. And I think for career centers, you know, it does impact you. You know, a lot of career centers had a lot of students who potentially had been students that were option 23s, that were continuing to gain some, you know, vocational training. And then we had some issues of, is the student staying because they can, or are they staying because there's an opening in the program, or are they staying because, you know, they and their parents are afraid to have the student, you know, go out and make a career decision and start conquering the world. So I think it means different things for the folks that are at career centers. So we're going to kind of dive in on the next slide because there is so much confusion about graduation. And I've used this a couple different times. And one of the things would be is it is such a complex discussion, because often if I use graduation and I'm talking to a building principal, he's using the definition that calculates his district report card. However, if we go back to the conversation that Amy and Ray kind of kicked off for us, if you're the special ed person, you're probably looking at graduation as what the definition is when I'm looking at my SPP. So what we're going to look at is some discussions. And when I say graduation or diploma, there's some things we're going to just talk about. We're going to do fact or fiction as we go through this. And then we're going to have some discussions trying to get us globally to start digesting the information. I think that is the toughest part about this. We all read the information. We all see it and hear it from our perspective. But I just think that the digesting is seeing that this comes from multiple perspectives. So the first question here on the slide is, there's one diploma in Ohio. Whatever path a student takes, they will still receive the same diploma. However, if a student uses additional options available only to students with IEPs, the state cannot count that student as earning a regular diploma when reporting for indicator 1. All right, so what we're looking at is take a minute, digest that, and we're going fact or fiction on this one. So those of you who are remote, you guys can throw that in the chat, let's look at it, see how much confusion, because the confusion is going to help us guide you guys through this process. I think career techs get to be the perfect storm for some of this information. So let's take a look here, my audience here. We can go fact or fiction out loud online. Let's put in the chat. Is statement 1 a fact or fiction? What do you guys think here?
Might be able to.
All right. All right, so I'm going to share the fact fiction for the group here so we can all see it. There's fact, fact, fact. We have a fiction here. So there you go. Thank you folks for participating and playing with us. All right, so the drum roll, Bob, if you would reveal the correct answer. It is fact. Ohio only has one diploma. At the end of the day, when a student with a disability who potentially used either IEP goals, potentially used their alternate assessment scores to meet their competency, that student walks across the stage and receives the same piece of paper as everyone else in that arena on that day. When they put their diploma next to their cake for their graduation party, it looks identical. There's no water line that says excused from consequences. So that student, that is a fact. All right, so this is why when we say diploma, my principal, oh, Bob, jumping. Oh.
Bob.
I'm not driving. I'm sorry.
Well, there's some spoiler alerts.
Quick, back up.
Oh, the pressure of being the MC. So, there you go. Good thing we're like Team Switzerland. All right. Great. Thank you, Bob. So I think that if just from the responses there, I think you can see where, there's some discussion, some confusion among educators. Imagine, how do we get this information out to parents, to their grandparents, to the students? So, that this is the truth. The next one is that the district report card is impacted when a student does not count as earning a regular diploma. So we're going to the same game here, fact or fiction. Do it as a waterfall in there. And then this group here can do the fact or fiction to their elbow partners, table partners. So you can see we have some differing opinions here in this first part. Those of you who have photographic memories are looking back when Bob gave the spoiler alert. So, all righty. So Bob, if you would be so kind to reveal the correct answer. Right, this is fiction, okay? So the graduation report cards that our building principals come out that have the stars instead of numbers are now, that is just looking at the 4 and 5 year graduate cohort. All right, that's what our building principals, our superintendents, and most of the folks that in our community see. Keeping in mind an SPP, you kind of have to go looking for it. It's kind of buried in those reports. And, you know, those are the reports and the action plans and that our supervisors of special needs, pupil personnel folks are very much concerned with. So awesome. So the next one we have here, so a student in the chat, so a student who is excused from the consequences of passing the state test does not count as a non-graduate. For your district
Right.
report card, correct.
And I'll jump in too, Jody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so they cannot be counted as having earned a regular diploma. They are not counted as a dropout. They are not counted as a non-graduate. I will also say, though, that there has been discussion about eventually moving that count of students with a regular diploma onto the local report card. It hasn't gotten there yet, but there has been discussion because the ESSA is a federal requirement to be looking at whether or not the student has a regular diploma. That's not a special education definition. That is a general education definition of regular diploma. So there's a possibility that we may see that on the report card at some point.
Awesome. For a lot of us, that would make this whole conversation a whole lot easier because then everybody, when I say graduate, everyone would have the same idea of what a graduate means. So awesome. Thank you. So I think, you know, one of the things would be is, you know, the longer I stay in education, I see that it's so important that we are all using the same operational definitions for what things are and as the non-example of what they are not. So thank you, Amy. All right, the next question. All students need to earn seals and at least one must be a state-defined seal. Same deal in the chat. Waterfall that out is fact or fiction. Elbow partner. I had a lot of head shaking going on in here too. All right. The drum roll, please.
Fence is killing me, Jody.
I know. I know. There it is. The long-awaited fact. So yeah, absolutely. That is a fact that students, all students, a big all, a big bold, a big black letters, all must earn seals and one must be the state seal. Okay. Now I've heard a lot of discussion in our region, which is region 5, about like that OMJ seal. You know, it is a state defined seal. However, it is locally monitored. And that seal gives you the flexibility to look at growth amongst your students. So, you know, I know that there's been a lot of discussions on how to help folks wrap their head around, you know, teamwork for your, you know, college-bound student may or may not look like teamwork for a student who is really involved. But I think as IEP teams, as districts, you definitely have the ability to, you know, use that rubric to monitor growth among your students. So
Yeah,
any other
and
questions? Go ahead. Thank you, Amy.
no, I don't see any questions in the chat, but Jody, I'll just really emphasize that if you are working with students who have more significant cognitive needs and are not sure how to, you know, approach the seals, please contact us. Myself and Travis Taylor at the Office of Graduate Success have been meeting very frequently with schools and families to talk about this. We actually have a group called Exploring Graduation. We have a group at the department, and Chelsea's also a part of that, where we are looking at how we can get even some more guidance out to really help teams think through how the seal that best fits that student's preferences, interest, needs, and strengths can be considered and then used as part of graduation requirements.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. It's great tag
Yeah.
team. And I love presenting when there's somebody else to tag team with. So I appreciate the help. So our next one is the percentage of students with disabilities earning a regular diploma is not reported for indicator 1 in the special ed profile. If the indicator 1 target is not met, actions would be required. So.
Hey, Joe, do you want to read that one again?
Yes, the percentage of students with disabilities earning a regular diploma is reported for indicator 1 in the special ed profile. If the indicator target is not met, actions would be required. So, and remember, this is a moving target. So it, right now it could be 64%, eventually it could be 66%.
Yeah, our final target for this 5-year cycle, we use stakeholders to help us reset these targets every 5 years. So our 5th year, which would be federal fiscal year 2025, is 70%.
All right, awesome. We have a lot of facts and a lot of concurring here. So the drum roll, please, Bob. Absolutely, this is a fact. So those of you at a career tech center may not necessarily be seeing this indicator, but when a district gets this, it is responded out and they get a nice little spreadsheet that shows the number of students who earned a federal recognized diploma, and then the number of students that exited, and that becomes a numerator denominator for their math facts, and then it becomes a percentage. So, that's in there.
Right. And this is the 2nd year that we have actually, as a department, considered indicator 1 and indicator 2 compliance indicators. Previously, they were measured, but there were no actions required if those targets were not met. So you may hear a lot more about indicator 1 and 2 than you previously had, which is, another reason why we wanted to bring it to your attention. There are corrective action plans then that the schools would complete as a result of if they did not meet that target. So you may be also kind of pulled into some of those discussions because, of course, you share your students. When we talk about implementation and the reflection that we had on the previous section of this presentation, we do want to think about how we can best support students. Of course, recognizing there are going to be some students who are appropriately utilizing those options available for students with IEPs.
That's a great comment, Amy. I think that I was just going to talk about that. In that process, their districts are required to do a self-review of their processes. And it's kind of divided into buckets, but I think the one bucket that is very much kind of tipping its hand to the benefits of career tech would be the intervention. So it talks about, do you have interventions? And then it talks about your programming. What type of programming, what type of flexibility, what type of, career tech program do you have? So I think a lot of districts or a lot of supervisors, administrators who might not have realized some of the value of the hands-on benefits of career tech are starting to see those. And I think honestly, that may be some of the reason behind the movement and interest back into some of the CBI and the benefits of CBI for some at-risk student populations.
Jody, I'm going to just pause just for a real quick minute, not to disrupt too much of the flow, but I think this is a perfect time to touch base on the question that was posed in the chat from Shannon related to if the student has not met graduation, or I'm sorry, if the student has met graduation requirements but chooses to defer, it is not held against districts. And this is kind of a yes/no answer. If a student has met graduation requirements, they have met graduation requirements. As Ray mentioned, when they exit school, they may not be counted as having earned a regular diploma if they used any of those 3 variations or options, as I had mentioned earlier. However, they are not graduating within their 4-year graduation cohort. So that will impact the local district in terms of their graduation rate, if that makes sense. So it will count for the number of years that it takes them to graduate. And that is, again, that's the IDEA kind of versus, for lack of a better term, the ESSA that is looking at graduation in 4 years versus IDEA that is provides the option for a free and appropriate public education until age 22 or when the regular diploma is met or earned. I hope that helps, Shannon.
So Amy, I want maybe wait till the bell rings. There you go. So just a question, like that chooses to defer, like, you know, there needs to be an educational reason when I look at that decision, the tool for students with IEPs, there needs to be an educational reason. This just can't be a student who, you know, decides like, you know, I'm not sure what I want to do. You know, I want to, you know, that's not a reason to defer if I've met graduation.
Right, right.
So can you talk a little bit about that too, please?
Sure. So, you know, as you mentioned, the graduation decision-making tool for students with IEPs was developed to help IEP teams consider when is the right time for a student to continue in school. Defer sometimes gets to be a confusing term because the students aren't really deferring their educational what they're entitled to with an IEP. It's just that they're not collecting their diploma at the same time as their typical peers. The questions that we have incorporated into the special education the decision-making tool really help you think about what IEP goals the student has or has not met, where that student is in terms of transition services. Are those transition services moving the student towards the post-secondary goals? And it really is meant to be an IEP team decision to discuss whether or not the student will remain in school or will exit. Also keeping in mind, though, that there is that they still are eligible for FAPE if they have not earned a regular diploma. So that's a really important piece that we want to make sure is clear.
For a student that's willing to program like Project Live, so they have met graduation requirements.
Yep. Shannon, did you want to add something? I can hear your voice.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought
okay.
I was unmuted, but so I'm not. So like for our Project Live program, if that kid has met all academics, they just choose not to receive their diploma and they go into that Project Live. Academically, they're good, but socially they still need a little bit. Or, you know, to work on independent living skills. Does that ding us?
So I'm going to kind of rephrase this just a little bit because, you know, as Jody mentioned, we're really working on wording just because there are so many terms that are similar and so much confusion out there. So I'm going to reword just a little bit to kind of help with you know, context here. So if the IEP team has determined that the student will continue in Project Life because there are needs that have been identified that will be addressed, they will not be graduating within 4 years, right? They'll be graduating in 5 or 6 years. So the school district cannot count that student as having graduated in 4 years. That will impact their graduation rate. Now, whether or not that would impact their indicator 1 depends on how the student obtained their diploma. So if the student has used the alternate assessments for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, has been excused from the consequences of earning the required scores on those assessments or the end of course exams, or used their IEP goals to meet course requirements, they cannot be counted for indicator 1 as having earned a regular diploma. Okay, they'll still get a diploma, but they can't be counted for indicator 1 when they exit.
Now, all the kids that we have in Project Life have received can receive a regular diploma. They just chose not to because they wanted to go on Project Life.
Shannon, yeah, so let me jump in there just real quickly. And I know, and we can also talk offline, but I think that this is really relevant because I'm sure your questions are those of many others as well. So I'll just kind of wrap this up relatively quickly. the student will earn an Ohio diploma.
Right.
Because they have met Ohio graduation requirements. They've met the graduation requirements of their school. They may not hold that piece of paper at the same time as their typical peers. They may not walk
Right.
across the stage, right? However, if they earned that diploma in one of those three ways that I've mentioned, so for example, if you had a student who's in Project Life who used the alternate assessment, we cannot count them for indicator one when they
Another-
exit school.
Okay.
Okay, they'll still get a diploma. We just can't count them for SPP indicator one for that district
It's not,
that
it's not the diploma
yeah.
that I'm worried about. I just don't like that we get dinged. I don't like that, you know, on a state report card. I don't agree with that. I wish you could,
Yeah,
can you fix that? I mean, can you change it around a little bit?
if I had the power to change the Every Student Succeeds Act, I would absolutely do that. But that, or the IDEA, that's where I talk about the competing federal law, right? IDEA says if the student requires additional services to meet their needs for free and appropriate public education, they can stay until they're 22. ESSA says we're going to count you for 4 years, and if you earned your diploma in a way that's different than your typical peers, we cannot count that as a regular diploma.
It just contradicts itself. You know what I mean?
It does. Yep. It's been a long-term this.
You know what, Amy, but I appreciate this discussion because I think what this discussion talks about is that in reality, special ed is a continuum and has to continue to be a continuum of services from our most involved students to our extremes, our other end of the student population who just need some, specially designed instruction to help them get through. So I think that is the reality of this. And at some point in time, as districts, as educators and advocates for students with disabilities, we need to be very much realize that some of this is the cost of doing business and education, and that thankfully the SPP indicator is not 100%, is that the federal government and the state realizes that 100% of students with disabilities are not going to graduate with a federally recognized diploma. All right. So I think that indeed, yes, on the report card, it is a ding. In the future, if and when those two definitions become the same, it won't be a ding. We'll all be working together.
That's what I
Yeah,
understood when we had legal updates, that they were, that the state or DO was working on changing that. But
I'm sorry, that who was working, Shannon, on changing that?
DO.
Right. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, I think that there's a lot of different things that we may be looking at, but we can't change the definition of a regular diploma. That's federally legislated. I will say, and I'll just say this is my last comment. Ohio is unique, and we very specifically placed that first sentence on that first paragraph on this slide, that there's only one diploma in Ohio. Many other states have more than one diploma. But those cannot be counted as a federally recognized diploma either. So a student may be on what's called a certificate track, for example, in Michigan. They are told right away that they are not meeting the same requirements as typical peers, and they will actually earn a certificate instead of a diploma. So Ohio has worked in many different stakeholder groups, and the stakeholder groups have said over and over again that they want to keep the single diploma, but we still do have to be very explicit that it doesn't technically count as a regular diploma. It's much more clear in some other states when a student physically earns a certificate.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
About, you said, so it's not counted in indicator one if they are alternatively assessed, if they've been excused from end of course exams, and I thought there was a third.
Right. Right. And that would be if they were using IEP goals to meet their course requirements. So this is a really unique situation where we may have a student who is not earning credits. What we're thinking of, extremely medically fragile children who are, hospitalized and not able to obtain typical course credits.
Is it any one of those criteria or all three?
Correct.
Of them?
Mhm. Yep.
Anyone? Okay, thank you.
Yep. And, I really recommend, if you haven't had a chance to watch the video for the graduation decision-making tool, it's about 10 minutes. It breaks down all of the things that we're talking about. We wanted to be really clear because we know it's confusing. So check that out if you haven't had a chance. All right, Jody, I think we're good. I don't know. I don't know if we've went way over our time, so I apologize to everyone
That's
about
all
that, but
I think we have one more, I think we will have one more question. So the question is if appropriate, students who participate in the Ohio Alternative Assessment for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, often referred to as the AASCD, may, after remediation and retake, use the alternative demonstration of competency to meet graduation requirements. Fact or fiction? So we could toss those in. Fact or fiction? There's a lot to this one, so take a little bit of time there and digesting that.
we will definitely unpack this one, right, Jody?
All right, so I had to unmute because my in-person audience is like, oh, so let's go through. Bob, the drum roll, please. Think we're going to get a review. Bob's going, these doggone slides are giving me fits today. This is that we all very much work in probably in Google Slides. This is a new thing for some of us to be working in PowerPoint. So thanks. I appreciate everyone being good sports on this one. So let's make sure. I'm going to wait till we get the question back on the screen, because there is a lot to consider in that one sentence. So.
And Marcia, we will jump into the question that you have there as we move forward. The culinary lab, yeah, give us are you using an owl? Is that why it's kind of moving back and forth?
We're using an owl, so if somebody, if I would get owls, let me see if it follows me. So.
Oh, well, you're not even being shown anymore, so.
Yeah, we'll show you. It's pretty awesome. We're looking through and they're making pastries and cookies, and it smells like they're starting to cook our lunch. So this is pretty amazing. So thank you. So back to
Jody,
the
can you see that? We had to.
Yep, we can see it.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
We got the answers.
We appreciate your tenacity, and you looked as calm as a duck on the surface, but I'm sure you were paddling, for your life underneath the water line. So thank you.
At the end of the day, if this is the worst thing that happens today.
Awesome. So there it is. So it is fact. If appropriate, a student who did take the alternative assessment for the most students with the most significantly cognitively disabled may, after remediation and a retake, use the alternative demonstration of competency. The key should be bold and about a 24 font is if appropriate. All right. So, we are seeing lots of crazy things going on out in the world in regards to this. So one of the things would be is the intent of this, if appropriate, is not to have every student who took an alternative assessment for the students with the most cognitive disabled students retake twice.
Right.
This is not a retest to go get a credential that is not beneficial. Now, I may not be the most populous person after this statement, but you know, if we have a student who is the most cognitively significantly disabled student, we have them take the test twice and go get a NIM certificate. Please, do we really think that that student, if you have that student in your mind who's probably never going to have a driver's license, is probably, if they were appropriately on the alternative assessment for the most significantly disabled students, is not going to be the commander of an emergency situation? Okay, we
Yeah.
have to have common sense in this. So that's why this if appropriate is in there.
And I think the other word, Jody, to really focus on here is may. Technically, could this happen? Could, through the way the legislation is written, could it happen? Yes. Yes, the student could do this. And Marcy, to your question, if they did use that alternative demonstration of competency to meet the graduation requirements, yes, they would count for indicator 1 because it would be a regular diploma. You know, they have used that for graduation requirements. However, to Jody's point and to Chelsea's point in the chat, we have to think about the implications for the student. This is a student-driven decision, not a data special education profile indicator 1 decision. Right. And so I think, I don't know, Jody, is it time for us to move into the reflection? I think this kind of
Right.
might be a good segue.
Well, you know what, Amy, let's take a look at, like, we have a question in there. So if a student passed the reading and math for the first time, can they use the alternative demonstration of competency? And the answer is no.
Wait. Which one was that? I'm sorry. I can't.
There's a question.
I don't know where we are.
It's a question.
Okay. If the students pass the reading and math in the first time, can they use the alternative demonstration? Well, okay, right. Go ahead, Jody. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I was reading it. Sorry.
No, so the answer is no. The way the legislation is set up, that is that until the testing requirements, because the alternative assessment is not a pathway that is available to all students, it is an alternative path. So a student cannot just take the alternative assessment, meet a competency, and you unlock the alternative
Right.
demonstration of competency.
Right, exactly. So the way that the legislation is written, and this is for all students, the alternative demonstration of competency cannot be used to count for competency unless the students have taken the assessment 2 times with remediation in between. That is the way that it is written. So while it may seem exceptionally convoluted, right, for a student to take that alternate assessment twice, it's because it is, right? If the student has passed the alternate assessment, has received the basic scores that are needed, we have to think long and hard about why we would subject that student to an additional remediation and an additional test, just so that we can utilize the alternative demonstrations of competency. There is nothing prohibiting a school from helping a student earn an industry recognized credential that matches their preferences, interests, needs, and strengths, or to participate in work-based learning, even if they have taken and received the basic scores for the Ohio Alternate Assessment for students with the most significant disabilities. They just can't use that alternative demonstration of competency for graduation requirements. Jody had a really key point. If the student has been, well, I mean, not if, we work really hard at the department to ensure that we have tools that can help IEP teams ensure that the students who are participating in the alternate assessment, the Ohio alternate assessment, are the right kids. We have finally gotten it down to a point right now in Ohio where we are right at that 1% mark. We are actually a leader in the country in this. So we know our tools have been replicated nationwide. Not to say that there aren't some students who may have been placed on the alternative assessment, the Ohio alternative assessment, or alternative assessment, I should say. However, we need to make or to us understand that it's not just an arbitrary decision for a student to take that alternate assessment. So they've met their competency, they've earned their competency requirements in a way that makes the most sense for them.
All right, so let's take a look at this scenario. This scenario was really, we tried to make it as applicable to our audience here today as we possibly could. So what we did is we kind of mocked up a scenario. We have an 11th grade student who's attending a career tech center. As of right now, they are on track to meet course requirements for graduation. Their next thing is that when we look at the second bucket for diplomas for graduation, I have that we have to look at demonstrating competency. So the student that we are referencing here took the alternative assessment for the students with the most significant cognitive disabilities at our partner school, and they scored basic in all the areas. So their ELA was a 485 and their math was a 489, which is considered to be competent at that basic level. So right now they have met competence requirements for graduation. So now we take a look now as we look at now, what do we have for readiness? Keeping in mind that at their home partner district, by meeting competency of a basic score in citizenship and science, they have right now earned 2 seals. They've earned that state seal in their citizenship, and they've earned their state seal in science. All right, so we're also quite aware that this student may be chipping away or in the process of earning 12 industrial recognized credentials at their career tech center. They haven't earned them yet, but they could very well be in the process. They also could have been in the process since the time they entered 9th grade. They could be in the process of earning and chipping away at that rubric for the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal. All right, so this is our student. So as a team, an IEP team, and our team could potentially involve maybe OOD, could also involve, of course, the parents, of course, the student, probably the Career Tech Center. The home district should be involved in that. You know, the supervisor should be involved in it. Potentially your lab instructor who spends 2.5 days or hours a day with this student should be in a meeting. And so next slide is going to talk about, you know, what do we really need to consider as we move forward for planning for this students. So the next slide is to talk about that really that student is on track towards earning their diploma. All right, albeit it is a state diploma. All right, so some things we need to consider, and we need to do this with the mindset of what is to benefit the student. We need to be careful, and we need to kind of keep ourselves in check is that we're to benefit the student. The student outcome is what education is about. You know, kind of, you know, in the whole craziness of accountability, we start worrying about our district report card. We worry about our state performance. But in reality, what do we need to unlock? What do we need to do moving forward? As a team, should we pursue an alternative demonstration of competency? Yeah, and I don't know, but I would think at this point, possibly our lab instructor may say, hey, this kid is a rock star, you know, in their lab. Does the type of diploma the student receives, is it going to impact the student as they move forward being a rock star in their career?
Right.
No.
And Jody, I think, you know, when we talk about diplomas, it's just, I'm going to continue to reiterate it. And I know I sound like a broken record, but that diploma will not look any different. No one will see a difference in a diploma. Now we can talk, and we will talk about, have we, you know, maintain the right level of rigor for our students. And, you know, we have to really think very strongly about whether or not they are going to be alternately assessed. But at this point, that diploma is not going to look any different. So, you know, yeah, what is the impact on the student? This is what we really hope that we can kind of drive home today.
Yeah, and great point, because at the end of the day, remember, next to this student's graduation cake at their party was the diploma. No one going through, dropping off their cards in the box knows any different. Neither would the employer who says, you know, have you graduated? Most of the time, that's just a check mark on an application. So, you know what, I believe there's some great comments, and we were hopeful that this would get
Yeah.
some discussion going. And I think, Tricia, you make a great point, is most of our career tech centers are still experiencing the impact of students who were put on alternative assessment for our students with the most significant disabilities prior to us having such a very specific tool. So absolutely, we potentially have a senior who was probably put on alternative assessment with the wrong mindset originally. So
Right. And
absolutely.
I want to address Brittany's comment. Brittany, absolutely. You were mentioning that would that student have qualified for the alternate assessment? Probably not, given almost definitely not, given the current tools that we have. However, to Trisha's point, we are seeing some students who are still in maybe their senior year or older. Maybe they've deferred graduation, or they're still in school, who may have, to Jody's point, not necessarily met those requirements in the way that we should have. So we've got some kind of interesting scenarios, and hopefully for like this year only, right? Hopefully that this is really moving out. We won't have to have this discussion. But you know, since it's relevant right now, and quite honestly, the calls have been coming in from parents asking us why their child is being asked to take the alternate assessment again. Even though they have scored basic. So we know it's happening. We understand that there are implications, as I said, for report cards and for special ed profiles and such, but we really, really want you to be thinking about what is right for the student in these situations.
Amy, I think those questions are all, but I've also heard, unfortunately, and it's alarming, I've heard people wanting their student who was had originally taken the alternative assessment, the most significantly involved students, they want, the kid was advanced, and the school district, paying attention to their own vested interest, not the interest of the student, wants the student to retest. You know, at some point in time, we had to realize, if that was your student and, you know, you clearly had a route to a diploma, you know, why would you want your student to retest? So I think that, you know, we need to realize, you know, with integrity, we need to, you know, think about the decisions and the implications of what we're asking students and parents to do.
Well, and I think, you know, one other last comment that I would say is, when I'm looking at even this consideration slide right now, what we didn't add in that is that what decisions have the IEP team made regarding this student's, you know, needs. So, I mean, this is not a decision that is just made by, you know, a singular individual, you know, an administrator, for example, at a school. This is an IEP team discussion. This is a much bigger discussion that needs to really dig in. And that's why it's so important. I'm going to go all the way back to, you know, transition planning. We need to be thinking about this when the student starts their transition planning. We also need to be looking at this when the student is using their graduation plan, right? When the student is a freshman and they have a graduation plan, all of this should be discussed. Do they have the right courses? Do they have the right, you know, competency? And what does this mean moving forward? Yep.
So, yeah, Lisa, exactly. What are they going to do with their careers? You know, are they going to be gainfully, competitively employed in what field, and if the credentials we're looking for, aligned to that field, that is awesome. We should not be asking students to, just because we think they can get a credential to get it if it's not aligned. So the next slide is really some slides for us all to consider, when we're looking at this. And I think, like I said, when I prefaced the start of this, I think our career tech centers are the perfect storm for these discussions, because career tech centers have always been about transition. We transition students in, we transition students out, and we have always been very concerned about our outcomes. We have followed up on students for post-secondary placement for years, and it has always been, are you employed? Are you enrolled? Are you enlisted? And is it within the field in which you were here getting your training for? So I think the next step is then, as career tech centers, as parts of an IEP team, how are we, using that students with IEP decision tool to support and discuss it with full transparency where a student's heading? Also too, is that tool going to change the landscape of what option 23 looks like within a career tech, potentially your project searches, your project life, your students that are continuing on because they need additional transition planning in order to position themselves to go out and conquer the world. Also too is this going to change career tech centers, your communication guides, your communication procedures that you use to communicate how you do business with your students, both transitioning them in and potentially transitioning them out? And then two is what other agencies need to be talking the same language and know, that there is potentially two different definitions for graduation, and that, they, by not being familiar, may be misguiding families throughout this transition plan. So any other questions, we'll field them, but I think we kind of beat that up, and I really appreciate everyone's time. But I think it is definitely a hot topic right now.
There are some questions on the idea board that I know Melissa is going to go through.
Yeah, I think we've hit these first three pretty well, but I want to make sure we cover this one. Does a parent have the final decision regarding when a student graduates, even though the rest of the IEP team may feel they are prepared and they have met all requirements?
Yeah, so we have received this question many, many times, so I appreciate that we brought it up here. I know that as you work through the tool, there is a question that says, does the parent and the student, if they've reached the age of majority, or the student in general, understand that the student who has not met the requirements for a regular diploma is able to continue in school, and or if they're not yet 22, they also, have potentially the option to stay in school. The reason we have that section there is not to say that the parent will unilaterally make the decision. It's that parents aren't often aware that the student actually has a right to stay in school until they earn the regular diploma or turn 22, whichever comes first. And that was something that came from a long time ago. We've had this DOE settlement that came out through the Office for Exceptional Children, or through Disability Rights Ohio. And one of the requirements, one of the areas that we had to address was ensuring that our families were aware of the student's right and that the students were aware of the right. So we include that very specifically so that we've explained it. From there, the IEP team will work to determine if that is a relevant need, right? So they're eligible, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that has to happen. The parent, the IEP team from the school district, they all bring together the data that they have, and they have a consensus to determine whether or not that student is going to be in need of additional services so that FAPE is provided. Hope that answers the question. There's an eligibility, but it doesn't guarantee that that student is going to remain.
And then Amy, these two seem similar. I think you've addressed it, but I just since it's on here a couple times. District report card isn't impacted when a student doesn't earn a regular diploma, but it does impact indicator 1.
There's a couple of negatives in there. I'm just trying to make sure I have it. Okay, so I'm going to flip it the other way to see if I'm getting it. So if a student doesn't earn a regular diploma, they don't earn their diploma in the same way as typical peers, they cannot be counted for indicator 1. They're counted as not earning that regular diploma. That does not impact at this time the district local report card. What does impact the district local report card is if the student remains in school longer than 4 years. That impacts their graduation rate, their 4-year graduation rate.
And Ray, does that get your question too?
No, I was trying to answer the first 2 questions specifically.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Well, keep using this idea boards, and if you have more questions or you're thinking about it and you get another question in your mind, please don't hesitate to ask us, and we will find the answer for you, because we want to make sure you're clear on this, and it's tricky. So we want to make sure, of course, we're doing the best for our students. And I recognize some of you on the call have really small schools, and so when you're talking about that, you want to do what's best for the student, but I also know you're worried about the perception of that report card. But you've got to have those tough discussions in your district to make sure that what the student needs is weighing heavily, more heavily maybe than that perception, and address some things you guys might be able to do to address the perception in the public, so they understand those. And I know it's complicated, so it might take some time, but that's something to consider. Bob, do you want to keep sharing, or do you want me to?
You might as well, since you've got yours up. Go ahead.
Okay. And sorry for all the errors. It wasn't Bob, it was me. I was trying to screen share and my computer kind of did some funny things there.
Wow, what a great discussion. So Melissa, are you going to go ahead and share?
Yep.
Okay, so we have Lisa Height, who is from Region 1 up next. And Lisa is going to talk about promising practices regarding selection and placement, serving students with disabilities in career tech education, the self-review tool. So next slide.
So one thing that I know we hear a lot in career tech education is, do we have the right student in the right program for the right reason? And as I've been working through the self-review tool, the Serving Students with Disabilities in Career Tech Education, I'm going to share a practice with you that we help to kind of facilitate discussion. And we're calling this a promising practice, this activity that we're about to share, because we consider a promising practice an activity, a procedure, or an approach that may lead to improved outcomes or increased efficiency. So we hope that by looking at this activity and going back in your districts and trying out this activity, it will lead to improved outcomes for all students and your career tech programs. So this kind of comes out of the Serving Students with Disabilities in Career Tech Education self-review tool. For those of you who have worked through that, it's a series of questions. This is the question that comes out of the application selection and placement section. And the question is, what collaborative practices are in place to support the transition of a student with a disability into the Career Tech Center or into a Career Tech program? And so the activity that we do to kind of begin these discussions to see if we're having some collaboration, or to begin the discussions about what kind of collaboration is taking place, we randomly pull 20 IEPs of students who are enrolled in the Career Tech programs, but we're also then going to look back at their 9th grade, 10th grade, and if they're in Career Tech, well, hopefully they are, right? Their 11th grade IEP, right? We're tracking those and we're looking specifically at section 1 of the IEP, section 5 of the IEP, their graduation plan, if we have access to that. I know we haven't maybe gotten in all centers to where we're actually getting those to come with us, but if we have access to those, looking at graduation plans as well, because graduation plans also identify what is their career goal. And then comparing that to program enrollment. So we're determining if section 1, section 5, possibly graduation plans match that program enrollment. So on the next slide, this is a school that I conducted this with recently, and they came up with the color coding, which I think worked really well. And there's a key there at the bottom. So if we just look at the first row up there, so the student is currently enrolled in auto technologies. In their 9th grade IEP, there was not a cohesiveness, right? That they did not in their IEP indicate that they were interested in auto tech. In 10th grade year, they did put that they were interested in auto tech. And then in their 11th grade year, we have it yellow as yes and no, meaning they mention it as an interest, but it is not stated in their career goal. So it's maybe not part of section 5. It might have been part of section 1. So there's, just a little bit of difference there. And that may be, right? We don't have all the information, but that may be because they got into the auto tech program and realized maybe it's really not where they want to be. So that one might make a little bit of sense. Some that you start to have conversations around are maybe that next one. So we have teaching professions is what the student is enrolled in the 11th grade. 9th grade did not mention wanting to be a teacher at all in the IEP. 10th grade did not mention wanting to be a teacher at all in the IEP. But in 11th grade, they are in teaching professions and they do want to be a teacher. Now we understand, kids can change their mind and do change their mind, but that's where we start to have discussions about, what happened here? What were we doing for, or maybe our career advising policy? What kind of discussions were taking place with the student about future planning goals, right? So that one is interesting. If you scan down a little and you see the red all the way across, we've got no, no, no. So the students enrolled in marketing. They didn't mention it at all in 9th grade, didn't mention it at all in 10th grade, didn't mention it at all in 11th grade, right? So we seem to have a disconnect, which makes you wonder what happened. How did they end up in marketing? And just having those discussions with our intervention specialists who are helping to guide students. And one thing I've heard, not particularly from this school, but just in talking with intervention specialists along the way, sometimes they are encourage a student just to choose a program because they want that kid to have some skills, right? So again, it's about the student and what they want for themselves, because as Jody just put in the chat, I wonder how successful that marketing student is, right? We want to set these kids up for success. So I just think this activity just helps us to start having conversations around what's happening during IEP meetings. If you are interested, right? So we have the cosmetology student in green there in the middle, green all the way across. That's fantastic. And if it's a student with a disability, right? And they mention in 9th grade that they're interested in cosmetology, well, then we might want to say, that's fantastic. Did you invite the cosmetology teacher to join the IEP meeting and be part of that IEP team discussion? Did we talk about strengths or what we can offer through the program or how we can support you in this program. What kind of collaboration is taking place to help that student smoothly transition into and be successful in the career tech programming. So this activity was a really good tool when I was working with this team who was going through the self-review tool, and a lot of good discussion came out of that about one, educating intervention specialists about all of the different programs, and even about aligning Section 5 to Section 6 when a student has identified a career, and making sure that those goals for Section 6 support the Section 5 goals. So really good discussions can come from this activity. We thought we would share that with you. Next slide. And we're going to look at some possible scenarios. And so some considerations to think about as we work through these scenarios. Do the students' interests match the program they were in? How could knowing this information early help the school prepare the student for the programming of choice, of their choice? And what strategies could educators use to help the student be successful in their program of choice? So a couple of scenarios, and I'm sure you all have your own scenarios as well, right? So we have in culinary arts, a student is in chef training, and the student breaks out into song and dance when he's stressed. This has happened twice when there was a knife in the student's hand. The teacher is worried about the safety of other students when this happens. So if you think back to, and I know we don't have all the information, but if you think back to that color coding, what are some questions that you can think of that we might ask of this situation? Go ahead and put some questions in chat. I'll give you a little bit here. So thinking about this chart, what questions do you have when thinking about this situation for this student? I like Heather's kind of, do you enjoy theater, acting, singing? Maybe they're in the wrong field, right? So did we explore, since that's their normal, what they use to self-monitor and self-regulate, maybe we should have explored some careers that might support that. Wonderful, wonderful way of looking at that. Is the culinary the student's choice of program? So if they were green all the way across, right, that changes that from what Heather had put in the chat, right? So if they were green all the way across, what supports can we put in place to help this student be successful, right? Maybe could we bring in OOD and see if they could help look at the layout of the lab and figure out how to make that maybe a safer environment for the student and the students around him. You know, maybe we could start practicing some self-regulation strategies that would limit what dances happen with the knife in hand, right? So there's all kinds of ways we could have done that. And knife safety for all students definitely always happens in lab, absolutely. But we have to think about, if this student does something a little differently, how can we help this student, right? Not to say, what's this kid doing in my program? If that's where this student wants to be, we want to do everything we can to help that student find success in that program. What kitchen tools might make a better microphone? Ooh, I love that, right? So we've got a little bit of a barrier, but we need to remove that barrier. And so we just need to brainstorm ways to make that happen. Yeah, so thank you. Lots of great ideas in the chat there. And next scenario. So we have a student who was originally placed in the law enforcement program. There was a discipline infraction, and the student was encouraged to find a new program when they went to horticulture. The
Yeah.
student is now having behaviors in this program as well. So thinking of, right, they chose to go into law enforcement. Something happened and said, you might want to look for a new program. And so they went to horticulture. What questions do you now have, or what supports might we now think of? In chat, someone said choose charting the life course trajectory to find out what the student wants and doesn't want. Excellent, excellent choice, right? So instead of just, hey, these are the 5 programs we have open, which one do you want to go into? Maybe we then say, okay, like if this is what has to happen, I'm not saying that it has to happen that the kid moves out of that program, right? I want to put that out there as well. I'm not saying that maybe that was even a good practice, but let's sit down with this kid again and go through some activities to help them make a decision that they are choosing a program because they're interested in working in that field, right? What's the root cause analysis has the team done to discern possible needs of support, right? If you don't solve the problem will continue. Absolutely, right? Get the IEP team together to determine what supports can be put in place. What does Section 5 say? Does it need to be amended? Absolutely, right? Are there other related, if they were in law enforcement, maybe they would want to be an EMT. Maybe are there other connected to law enforcement, right? But again, lots of different ways we can look at this, but thinking about it's the student's choice, and that collaboration and communication between the special education department and the career tech program is what is essential to help that kid be most successful. And then it says, thanks, Bob. Tools make charting the life course tools make great AATAs. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then Angie, I really like your comment, about the root cause again. Is it the behavior coming from behavior issues, sensory issues, boredom issues? Maybe they really didn't want to be in law enforcement when they got there, so they started to act up. It really goes back to then getting back with that student and figuring out what is it they want to do. What is it they want to do for their next step, and how can we help them get there? Next slide. So as we go into breakout rooms today, those may be some ways you could start to talk about, and possibly in your breakout room, if you have a scenario, and let the people in the room help you brainstorm that, help you problem solve ways that we could collaborate and communicate to do what's best for the students. To be thinking about that color coding, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. What would that look like if you did a random check yourself and just pulled out 10, 20 IEPs to see if we might have some areas where communication and collaboration need a little bit of help. So thanks for participating. I loved all of the suggestions in chat. Good things that we should be talking about every day. So just as you think about that activity, definitely start thinking about what questions you should be asking when you're looking at that data in that visual data view. Are there programs available for the abilities and interests based on future plans identified in section 5? Do we need to add programs? So when we saw reds 3 times in a row, even when the student was in the program, maybe we could start to ask, okay, so what of those kids, what program did they end up in? Is there another alternative that would be similar? Or what did they have on section 5? Are we seeing trends that maybe there was another program that we haven't thought of yet, right? That we haven't added to our course offerings. If the student is enrolled in a program that was identified in section 5, what activities and services were identified in 9th and 10th grade to help them be successful academically and behaviorally in that program? I think that's one of my favorite questions. And maybe just a question we could start throwing out to our intervention specialists at the 9th grade. right? So as students are creating those transition goals and their future career goals, how are we providing activities and services that academically help them or behaviorally help them to get to that career? One of my favorite questions there. And what data is being discussed with students and families to help them make informed decisions for their career goals? What systems do we have in place for an intervention specialist to collaborate with the CT program instructor, right? So if you're at a career center, right, and in 9th grade, they're having conversations about future careers that they express interest in your career center, are you being invited to those meetings, right? Maybe you just zoom in for 10 minutes, right? Technology certainly has made it easier for us to have those collaboration times. And then how are your graduation plans shared with your stakeholders? Does your partner school or homeschool share their grad plans with the career tech school? Or even if you're a comprehensive, are those graduation plans being shared with ISs? Are those graduation plans being shared with the career tech program instructor? So just things to think about as you reflect on your practices and helping to get students in the right program for the right reason. And so all of us, the CTPD consultants, are really happy to assist you if you would like support with this activity. It definitely allows for all voices in the team to be heard, and you can fully participate when a career tech consultant is the one facilitating the activity for you. So we're here, we're available, and we're happy to assist you in this. And just thinking about, ways that we can help, right? So that self-review process, serving students with disabilities in career tech education. Again, these are the areas that we look at: recruitment and application processes, selection and placement, provision of special education services. I like to think of that section as, so we've got them in, now how are they doing in the program and how are we supporting them to be successful? And then continuous improvement, which can help feed your CLNA. So evaluation of student performance, size, scope, and quality, labor market alignment, progress toward implementing CTE programs of study, improving equity and access, direct connection there, which obviously is all about Perkins 5, which I know those deadlines are coming up. March, right? I think March 15th, maybe, not sure on that date, but it's coming. And you can definitely, using the self-review, serving students with disabilities in career tech education, the questions in that align perfectly to the work that you need to look at in the CLNA to feed your Perkins plan.
Jody, did you want to say anything?
No, Lisa, thank you very much. I had stepped away and I couldn't find my mute button. Thanks for helping me tag team.
Lisa,
So-
thanks so much. Melissa's going to give us some upcoming events and a little bit more information about some great opportunities on the horizon.
Yeah, so we've got, and again, this slide deck will be posted to the Padlet, and we'll put the links in the chat again. But we have a couple upcoming events. The last 2 days of our career planning for graduation and beyond series. In April 16th, we're going to share some practices around the state that involve career planning and career advising for all students, and a lot about what we talked about today. How do we make sure the students we're serving are reaching their goals and have what they need to do that next step after they graduate? And then May 8th, a little bit more information about industry recognized credentials in preparation for when the department opens that summer window for CTE 26s again. Then Ohio ACT is sponsoring lots of great activities this spring. They're reviving the academics and instruction division. And so there are a couple meetings here. These are all virtual. The spring Octa conference is coming up in a couple weeks in Dublin. And then we encourage all of you to at least have someone from your district or a couple people from your district join the virtual WebZam update, annual update. If you're a satellite person, they have a division meeting coming up, and then CBI division meeting at Miami Valley CTC. I'm not sure what that one was. I apologize. Let's see. Then Ohio College Tech Prep, they're getting ready to do their Success Bound activities. And so they're in order by date. And the links to register for those activities are here. Southwest does Success Bound just a little bit different. They do multiple activities, so you can check out what they're doing by clicking that link. And then we have one more statewide CTE and Special Ed Leaders Network meeting this year. It is April 17th. And the time is the same, and it will be virtual again. So we'd like to make sure that you get credit for today with a certificate and have all that stuff you need for your LPDC, sorry, your licensure renewal. Oops. Lisa or Bob, can you help me put those links in the chat? They're in the notes piece. So if you do the QR code, that will take you to the certificate, and then we'll also have the Padlet available for you. And give me a little bit of time today. I'll post everything we talked about, including links to things that were put in the chat on the Padlet. I've got a couple meetings right after this, so it won't be immediate, but it'll be there before the tomorrow. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into our regional breakouts, and it's just going to be a chance to talk with the people in your area, maybe talk about some of those scenarios Lisa chatted about, ask any more questions you might have, and then you know, just get a little time together as that smaller group. We will not be coming back to the big meeting after our breakouts, so don't worry if something changes and you've got to run or something. So I'm gonna, before I open these breakout rooms, does anyone have a question for the good of the order, or just want to real quick get something clarified?
Well, I was able to put the Padlet in chat, but I'm not seeing a link to the feedback other than the QR code.
I'm trying to get that. I apologize.
Nice one, Lynn. Have to give you that. Give you props for that. Good sense of humor today. Okay, so when we do our breakouts, we are going to have, they're in by region and usually a name next to it. So region 1 will be Lisa. Regions 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9 are at the watch party, and so they're going to be joining together. Then region 6 and 10 will be with Ray Blevins. Carrie had to step away. So 10 is going into region 6. Region 11 will be with Radisha. Region 12 with Cindy. Southwest will be region 13 and 14, and you'll be with me. Southeast will be region 15 and 16. You'll be with Beth, and region 7 will be with Julie. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms, and you get to select your room. So here we go. If you scroll down, you can see the rooms that you get to choose in.
And I did put the evaluation link in the chat. Sorry, it took me a second to get to it.
That's all right. Consultants, if you want to grab that link, then when you get in your breakout room, you can add it there if you'd like. And don't be afraid to stay for the breakout. We hear you all want to network more, so don't be afraid. We're not going to bite.